Welcome one, welcome all. I am Bridger, and welcome to Tales of Citizens. We got a great show for you today. It's action-packed, it's jam-packed, it's totally full with all the stuff that's been coming out recently, and I've got my two co-hosts here to walk through it with me, Calathulu and Gray. Welcome.
Cheers, all.
Hello.
So, it has been crazy this past month, guys. I mean, Stranger Things is amazing, and there's Destiny 2, but we can't talk about any of that. We can't talk about any of it because we have more than 3 shows worth of things to talk about that just have to do with Star Citizen, and that's incredible.
If this wasn't enough of a hint, go get a beer now. You'll be here a while.
It's going to be a long show, but we're going to try to move through it as quick as possible because I don't have all night. But the next show is going to be last Sunday in November 26th to be exact. And I should actually put the correct dates in here. We record at 7 p.m. Eastern Time on the YouTube channel for Sound Strategy Network, as well as the Bridger 15 Twitch page. So let's jump right in. We have had a ridiculous grouping of things for the past couple of months. Now, I'm just going to briefly go over some of the cool things we saw in the Around the Verse episodes earlier in October. They did the episode about the manned turret makeover, which is amazing. And yet, we're going to spend about 5 minutes on it because there's so much else to talk about. But, Gray, your thoughts about the new turret makeover. First, can you give a quick rundown of like the main elements here that we're going to see that if people didn't watch that information?
So there's a couple of really big things here. The first one is turrets are no longer going to be one size fits all. That's a pretty big change. It means that they can say, okay, the constellation, the turrets are underperforming. So let's buff them.
Mm-hmm.
And that doesn't affect any other ship. It would just straight up be changing the constellation's turrets. And that also means that you can't swap turrets between ships. There's no universal sizing for that necessarily. The only thing that's going to matter is what weapons they choose to let be mounted on that particular kind of ship's turret in that particular model. So pretty straightforward.
Which was expected.
Yes, it was a long time coming. Honestly, the idea of being able to swap anything out was probably not the best move. Same time, the other thing that we found with the turrets was that, honestly, they kind of sucked. There was a difficulty in getting them to hit anything. There was difficulty in actually having them be useful. So they are making them a little bit more viable. They're going to try to make them be much higher damage output by the sound of it. And in return, there's 2 things that you're going to get from that. One of them is you will be able to breach a ship via a turret hole. So if you blow a turret off...
That is huge.
Yeah.
Because how are you gonna breach a ship? They had to figure out, are we gonna just like procedurally generate a breach? No. They now have all large ships are going to have turrets, basically, and so they have a built-in breach point. It solves 2 problems simultaneously. It's great. It's a great idea.
I have a complaint with this whole system, though. My plan for breaching a ship was to buy it a drink, take it back to my place.
You can still do that with the
there. You'll let the rape culture take over, but no, apparently.
No. That's against the rules. So
Ew.
the things that I think were the biggest changes or interesting things happening in this particular update are that they went from like Battlefield 1942 turrets. I don't remember if you played that game way back in the day, but those turrets did not compensate at all for the driver turning the turret of the Sherman tank, right? So as the driver's looking around with the turret, you're sitting there going, all right, I'm aiming for something. Whoa, I'm looking over here now. Whoa, I'm looking over there. And it was basically impossible. You basically only rid in that machine gunner position on any tank to get somewhere quickly, except you jump out as soon as combat happened because you were useless in there. But
yeah, it was awful.
Yeah.
So they have put in the compensation. So we went from Battlefield 1942 to like Battlefield 2, I think is where they put in that compensators in the turrets. So
the
that
other
way,
thing that's worth noting, they did finally mention how we're going to be able to use turrets if you don't have a whole bunch of people on your crew, and it's the ship computer.
yes.
You're going to have blades. You'll be able to choose to fill X number of blades with however many you have, with all sorts of various things that include turret controllers. So it's possible that if you're flying around...
Or you can still have an AI. I think you might still need an AI crew for a manned turret, because they did make the distinction between manned turrets and remote turrets, which are saying the AI can control manned turrets in addition to remote turrets too.
Yes, but
Okay.
they've said that any manned turret can be turned into a computer-controlled turret. It won't be very effective, I suspect, compared to an AI. They'll probably make it so that AI have more accuracy
Right.
and all that kind of
If you
stuff.
hire an AI crewman, it's a
Yeah,
human at the controls and theoretically better than a standard blade in the computer. I'm guessing if you use
exactly.
multiple blades or you take up more spaces or you there's some opportunity cost there, you can make your turret super effective, but at the cost of something else, right?
Everything else. Yeah.
Maybe your maneuvering computer isn't as fast as processing your inputs, so your ship gets sluggish and less agile, something to that effect. I don't know. We'll have to
Yeah.
see. But so you get the compensation for movement, but they do have like a maximum speed the turret can rotate. So if you have a turret on like a very agile ship that's spinning around and your pilot's not making any attempt to help you out, it's still not going to be able to keep you perfectly on target if your actual ship is maneuvering heavily to
Yeah.
keep its own things in line. However, I think in most cases the larger ships that have the turrets are not going to be spinning around faster than the turret can compensate. Probably.
Except for the Constellation, probably, yeah.
Maybe the
We'll see
Constellation
about
could
that
do it.
one.
Or the Freelance.
The other
Yeah.
question that we're going to see is on things like the Constellation. Um, do we see people just slave those to the pilot? Because you're still going to have the option, they're saying, to slave turrets to forward fire mode.
That was my question. I didn't see anything. I was
No, they,
looking
there was a
carefully.
brief mention of that. They still intended to make it so you can
Okay.
forward fire your turrets.
That makes sense,
Um,
especially on things like the Hornet, where it has that like ball turret on the top that's basically
yeah.
normally would be slave to the
Well,
pilot because it's only a
the
one-seater
Vanguard.
ship.
I mean, the
Yeah.
Vanguard's the real culprit here. We've never had the Vanguard able to slave that turret forward, so everybody who's been flying one of these things has been doing it with two fewer guns or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the other thing that I really like is that your view can move around as fast as you want, but the turret will then follow your view.
Yeah.
Instead of you like trying to drag it along, it feels like it's just it's more responsive, it's faster turning, et cetera, et cetera. But it's also feels like the method for control has been significantly improved. The other big
Yes.
change is the alternating fire between guns. So instead of having just both guns firing at the same time, you can alternate fire to get a more rapid fire approach that does less per shot damage, essentially.
The
So
term for
that's
that
good.
is chain fire, correct. It's chain fire.
Chain fire, is that it?
Yep. Chain
Okay.
fire between guns.
This is particularly important when you're talking about lasers that aren't, for example, the Bulldog. You don't
Yeah.
really necessarily care if the Bulldog's going bam, 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 and you've just got that constant stream of fire that you can trace.
Yep.
But when you start talking about, I don't know, the M4As or whatever those lasers are that have some time between them,
Yeah.
not
You want to
firing
go
two and
compensate.
then waiting makes a lot of sense. Just
Yep.
one, 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 and you're much more likely to be able to lead your target properly.
So
Well, and then there's also a constant drain on power instead of a sudden surge.
Yes.
So one thing I noticed, and let's see if I can find the right piece of video here, is to prevent you from shooting your own ship, Sean Connery style in The Last Crusade, the turrets automatically will go like up above the ship geometry to like they will not actually go. So you can see here, perfect example, as the pilot is looking down towards his ship, the turret actual reticle remains up and out of the way. But to me, it looks like in this example, and maybe they're tightening it up, it looks like it's way overcompensating. Like I want to get a lot closer to actually shooting my own ship.
No, but overcompensating's okay because if they bucked the back of the ship upward or the front of the ship down, as the case
While
is
the
here,
shot was in the air.
well, the shot's in the air, you do have potential to hit the back of your
Ooh,
ship.
that is
so they
true.
need to overcompensate.
That is
And at
true.
the same time, let's say from a gameplay perspective, this is actually more fun. It
Yeah.
creates a slightly bigger dead zone for ships to try to get into, which means
Ah,
that
there's some
your
counterplay
pilot
there.
has to do more bucking up and down to force the dead zone not to be there.
I see.
Or-
Okay, I will accept that. That is now officially canon in my head, and it has nothing to do with any coding or mechanical technical problems. All right. So anyway, I
I mean,
also
they can
like.
tune it.
I
but
also like.
I would imagine to see a big dead zone.
Yeah. And I also like the fact that they mentioned that they're going to be allowing target information to share between crew members, so you can see maybe different colored reticles on various enemies based on which turret member or which pilot is targeting something. So you can say, okay, everybody target my target or something like that, and you can say, oh, he's red, so everybody shoot at the red target or something like that to try and concentrate fire. Okay. Anyway,
Yeah.
we had all that, and then we had the other Around the Verse episode that really is. We had two about like updating armor graphic wise, and I'm like, it's like, I'm sorry, it's not my. I don't care. It's gonna look cool, and that's all you need to tell me. That's end of episode. The armor's looking cooler than it did before. I got it. I'm totally there. Art is not my favorite thing, but
you've gone Valley Girl on us.
I have.
They are prettier.
They are prettier. All right, so Around the Verse cockpits, enhancing the experience. Lots of small updates and changes. It's a pretty cool episode. I recommend go checking it out. But the most meaningful things are that there's going to be a lot more visual effects in the cockpits, and there's going to be a lot of other small improvements about the location of various screens and things that you can see while you're inside the cockpit that make it easier and better gameplay wise. And the actor status system that we talked about, I think the last episode, is now hooked into the cockpit system. So as you're pulling more G-forces, then you're going to be changing how your character's breathing. You're going to hear that effect. So you get more feedback from the G-forces other than just the blackout effect. You'll hear your character breathing in different ways, more restrictively, more intensely, and it will use more O2. So if your life support gets knocked out and you're still fighting, your O2 is going to deplete at a faster rate because your body is physically dealing with these G-forces, and that takes more oxygen in this case, as they have it set up. So that's pretty cool. Liking it, loving it. Any other thoughts you guys wanted to have before we jump on to the main event of tonight's show?
No. There is just a quick note. We have a link further down in the show notes to the Shipyard post on turrets in bullet points.
Mm-hmm.
That has a lot to talk about what we were just saying.
Yeah, we'll talk a little bit more about turrets in a moment because we did kind of skip through that, but that's also on the list here. And in fact, it's just, you know why? It's because you put the Pioneer somehow got way above everything else. But we're doing it in chronological order.
It's the game.
Chronological? What
Chronological.
the hell?
There you go.
Yes. Yeah. So we're gonna put that in Sitcon. Bingo in the show notes. Show notes, by the way, can be found at talesofshow.com. So.
And
the Shipyard.
We can discuss Bridger's meth addiction right now.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Shipyard has been a series of 10 design articles. We haven't seen this many design articles since like the year after the Kickstarter.
2013, yeah.
That's it. We haven't basically they stopped putting out design articles because they ran out of things. We've designed all the things that we know about right now, and finally we have a big update, and it all revolves around ships. And so it's great. So the new ship matrix is live.
Yes.
But when I thought about that, I don't know about you guys, but I thought we'd see an actual change to the menu system, because if you're at this site and you're scrolling through, okay, let me scroll through these ships. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, what am I? I'm like halfway through. Nope, not there yet. 7, 8, 9. It takes so long. Why can't this be in
search?
I guess
I have three monitors at 1920 by 1080, and I cannot get every ship on all 3 monitors at once.
I mean, I feel like this should have buttons at the top that help you filter these things out by role and career, for example. These new things that they rolled out.
Got search ship and that's it.
Yeah, but if I type in industrial, does that actually work? It looks like it does. So you can search by role and career, but you have to know those words ahead of time. It's not the most intuitive interface, which is annoying.
I just misspelled something, but if I type in fighter, that pops up with everything.
Right, that's one of well, I just typed in fight. Hey,
fight even works. So you're telling me it's
well, sure, but it shows up with the Aurora LN, so clearly it's broken.
You use the filter, but ultimately, this is it's a system that needs a few options. But honestly, how often do you guys go to this site to do anything? Because
it's garbage. I never go to the damn thing. Here's what I want to see. Here's what I want to see. I want to see a ship matrix. A matrix meaning a 3-dimensional grid. Okay, here's all the origin ships. Here's all the this ships. And then have it so you can, rotate them around. Okay, no, I want to see things by role. I want to see things by this. And have them be little JPEGs here, fitting almost everything on a vertical page that you can scroll up and down. Then you can select them from that page to compare. And once you've selected the 2 or 3 or 4 or 10 or 20 that you wanted to compare, then you get to this screen with the model and the manufacturer and the specifications and the weaponry and all of these things. This screen is still very valuable to make those comparisons. But if you make this the screen where you select everything, it takes forever to get to the newer ships.
I'd like to point out what happens if you go to store and then click ships.
It looks so much better, right? I like that look.
I mean, you have the ability to talk about ship class, you have the ability to talk about mass, you have all these filters that you can make.
But I can't click here and say compare the Hornet to the Mustang Alpha. Like, that's the thing I'm looking for.
You can click view specs and options, and it'll give you all that information. But it doesn't bring you to the ship matrix.
It's not perfect, and it's bothering me. Okay, anyway, that's my own pet peeve, and that's my own thing. But let's get back to the real cool stuff.
Yeah, the shop seems to be actually better laid out than the ship matrix.
Definitely. Okay, so anyway, that's my thing. But the careers and roles, very cool that they finally... I mean, I feel like it had been getting very nebulous and, like, very... disorganized. How this new ship is kind of like a light fighter, or it's a heavy fighter. It's got some transport we don't really like. They use different words and like combat interdictor, like, but now they have like an actual built-in organizational meaning. What does fighter mean? What does interdictor mean? What does transport mean? And then they break those down into subcategories, and that's what the roles are. And I love that. I love that kind of hierarchy and organization.
To be clear, this post didn't give us a definition of every one of the things.
Correct. It's only a preview.
Only a few that they were comfortable talking to us about. You know, things like touring and what
Expedition.
Was the other big one? No, there's one that Pathfinder. That was the interesting one to me.
See,
finally saying like, when you're finally starting to talk about, okay, we're not in a Karak.
Right. Not in a Pathfinder.
Yeah, the Karak is a Pathfinder, or is a actual explorer. It's a long-range explorer. That's a big thing for them to say, okay, now this is an expedition ship versus a Pathfinder ship. It should give you at least a vague idea of what they're talking about.
What you're walking into.
Yeah.
And what you're buying into.
Right.
Well, now, and the thing with touring that's interesting to me is they're basically like, yeah, this is an expedition ship, except it's luxurious, and it's probably more fragile.
Yeah.
I mean, really.
Oh, goody.
So here's the thing. It was important for them internally to nail down all of these roles and careers and things like that, because my concern, and I've mentioned this on previous shows, has been if you muddy the waters in a given role too much, you lose the distinction between different ships, right? If you have 6 different dogfighters, each can be fairly unique. If you have 30 different dogfighters, then many of them are going to basically be the same. There's only so far you can twist the various knobs to make them different from each other. Yeah. And this lets them really examine and say, okay, we've got 6, light fighters, 6 heavy fighters, 10 interdictors, or whatever the number winds up being, 2 bombers. And then, here's a ship type that we don't have enough of. We only have like 2 mining ships. Maybe there's a situation where a 3rd mining ship could fit a different role, or a 2nd salvage ship, or whatever. So that tool is very valuable for them, I think, in the end. I'm glad that they have that. So that's the careers and roles, kind of in the preview phase, and we'll see what else we find. Now, ship mass was really interesting. Callie, I know you were interested in ship mass.
It's all about mass.
Yeah.
I am indeed about mass and gains. And these are getting big. I mean, they're I popped back over here to the matrix that I was looking at a minute ago. No, I'm on store. Yeah, so I mean, they're getting to be more realistic. That's the thing. I mean, the old ship mass thing, and just as a comparison point, the first frigate that was giant that was released, whose name escapes me right
the Idris was originally a frigate, and then it turned into a destroyer.
It had the same mass.
It was a Corvette, and then
that's right. It was a Corvette.
The same mass as a Los Angeles class attack submarine. As a comparison point.
Nice.
But it was far, far larger. So either we're using, some kind of
ultra
metal, or So yes,
Light aluminum.
yeah. So the ship mass is actually
Transparent aluminum.
So the ship mass is actually looking a lot more realistic these days, which is really a nice thing.
Which, by the way,
And,
I don't want to jump too far ahead,
yeah.
but the top speed of the new ship,
Yes.
25 meters a second.
Whoa.
It's not going to be quick.
No. No,
So
you're not
when we're
making any
talking about
deliveries
mass,
in that thing.
yeah, they
And
are clearly
Aurora,
to a point where they're saying, by the way,
yeah, just a warning. The Aurora, for comparison, is 150 meters per second, which is probably considered
To
the
the
Aurora
low
is
end,
like
yeah.
your base model of everything. That gives you your comparison point, right? But yeah, no, they're actually doing much, much better now. I mean, 25,000 kilograms for the Aurora. Let me scroll over here, something a little bigger. And we've got 35 million kilograms for the Pioneer.
Once we
Which,
get to that many million kilograms, can we just use megagrams? Is that a thing?
you could. I mean, legally you could, right?
I mean, within the whole concept of within the whole I've now broken the ship matrix.
Oh, that's good. It's
Okay,
brand new.
yeah.
It's got bugs. So, Gray, I happen to think that the way in which they decided to calculate the new numbers is so cool. Is it
It
not?
is, isn't it?
Basically, how did they do? Tell us about this.
So let me pull up the thing so I don't get this wrong. Because the last thing I want to do is.
Well, while you're doing that, so they originally kind of made guesses on the numbers based on real life things, like the Origin 300i is about the size and roll of an F-18, so we're gonna make it about a little bit heavier than an F-18, and then it turns out it's actually not that. It should be way heavier than that based on what they have.
Yes.
And part of the problem is this thing with the interior mesh and the interior geometry. One of the things that they did this time around is they said, okay, well, how much is actually blocked out inside as open space? So you can get the whole volume of the thing, but then they have to figure out how much of that volume is going to be air. And then once they figured that out, they had to say, well, how much of it is going to be armored exterior?
So specifically, for people who haven't read the article, the way they decided to go about determining mass wasn't to arbitrarily say this ship looks a little bigger. They took the meshes that make the ship up in 3D, the visual look of the ship, and they took the entire outside of the ship, and they just calculated the volume in their 3D modeling software, essentially.
And that's everything. That's even like the wings.
Yes, that's everything.
The
everything, including all the internal space, the whole complete volume. Then they subtracted the internal volume of like the hallways and the cockpit and things like that, and that's where they get their base starting number, and then they make little tweaks from there, but that gave them a very good starting point for all of their ships for a realistic mass, and I thought that is the coolest idea ever.
It's a good call. It's certainly better numbers than the first ones bandied about for the aforementioned reasons of it was wildly underestimated as far as the mass these ships would have, even with state-of-the-art technologies.
Yeah, and that they also mentioned that certain manufacturers get a lighter density for their calculations. So even if two ships are the same volume, an Origin ship with the same volume as an RSI ship is going to use lightweight, more expensive materials, so they are going to be a lighter mass and therefore more agile, which is awesome because my 325A just got an upgrade. Well, maybe. Well, it's actually getting a rework.
The only one it's ever gotten since that one patch in Arena Commander where it was God.
Yes, exactly.
Though I will say, I was surprised at how much more mass the Banu ships got out of this.
Really?
Well, keep in mind, the Banu, the whole thing with their race is this like unoptimized brute force because they live, 35 years?
So the Merchantman is at like 10 million kilograms right now.
Oh, it's going to be slow. It's going to be heavy.
Slow.
It's going to be
not
hilarious.
Tender yet, though, and I'm looking forward to that because that thing's going to be a beast of a ship.
All of those huge forward-facing guns, my impression on the Merchantman was that it was made to say, I will be getting to that location.
It is.
Please get out of the
blockade runner, right?
Yeah. Well, you figure the idea would be that if somebody stepped in front of you, a blockade doesn't mean small ships. It can't.
Yeah.
It has to be something big enough to physically stop you.
To jam its way through.
So yeah, your solution is going to be to put a hole in it.
So, okay, so the Defender, for reference, 78,000 kilograms. Uh, the Banyu
37,
Merchant, 10
37
million
metric
kilograms.
tons.
Yeah. So yeah, we're looking at the alien ships in the Banyu are big, and the Vanduul are quite light.
Well, the Vandal probably don't have very thick armor. I mean, that's the other thing is they take into account the role
Yeah.
of a ship. If it's a heavy fighter and it's got
Yeah.
a lot of
The
armor built
Vandal are
into
made
it,
of
it's going to
tissue
be.
paper,
Yeah, the
tissue
Vandal ships
aluminum.
are very light because they don't have a lot of armor. So that's
Yeah.
probably one of the factors in there.
Well, and
Um,
that's going to go back to all the people being like, "Oh, make my glaive super powerful." It's not going to happen, folks.
it's going to be
It's
super powerful in its one thing. It's going to be fast and it's going to be light, but it's not going
it's
to
going to
have
be
a
fast.
giant
It's a
super weapon
straight
on the
line.
front, and it's
Well,
not
it
going to
does
have
have
great
giant super
shields.
weapons. It has giant plasma cannons on it. That's the
Well,
trick. It's going to
okay.
be light, it's going to be fast, and it's going to throw plasma at people. But the thing's going to be made out of aluminum.
Yeah,
The
exactly.
Vandal aces who live more than a couple of fights, you should be afraid of them. Really.
They're super great. All
Though I
right.
will say the Misk Hull series, that is a giant spread of weights. Like
Yes.
It
there is
is.
a very large area missing there in the center. They go from 122,000 kilograms to 1.652 million kilograms real
Is that
quick.
hull A to all hull E?
That's correct.
I got a hull B, so I'm feeling okay about that.
You're looking
So
at
That's not bad.
387.5 thousand kilograms.
So the next set of articles here talked about ship technical information and how it's displayed in the in the new matrix and technical specs and things like that. And they talked about ship sizes. You got vehicle, snub, small, medium, large, capital. But the thing that stood out to me in this article, I got to ask you guys, why does the reclaim not the reclaimer reclaimer why does it pitch less quickly than it yaws?
Rust replacement?
I mean, is that? Do you think that's not a mistake? Do you think that's on purpose for its role? Because in any kind of dogfighting situation, I expect
It's
the way that they've been trying to create a more World War II like feel.
it's not going to dogfight.
The
It's a reclaimer.
no, I know the Reclaimer's not going to, but I was just surprised because I figured every ship would turn the same way. But maybe the bigger ships, they just have, they thought it would look stupid for a big ship to be pitching in order to change its orientation. So they decided, no, actually, it's just going to yaw. Because that's what like
I don't.
Star Destroyers do. They don't pitch up over to turn
Yeah.
around. They just turn
I
around.
don't think it came down to looking stupid or whatnot. My guess is the model where the thrusters are placed led to that result.
Yeah, that might be true. But I mean,
Like,
you could
look at
place
some of
more or
our
fewer thrusters in different places to change the way you want it to fly. So in the end, they still
yeah.
made a conscious decision to make it fly that way, even if it's the
Yep.
thruster positioning that did it. And I think honestly, it's because we equate bigger ships with ships that float on the ocean, and we
Hmm.
equate smaller ships with fighters that fly through the air. And
Fair.
so when you think of a big ship turning, you think of it like a battleship or a carrier turning on the ocean. That would be my guess. I'm going to go with that as my hypothesis. I thought that was an interesting note.
Yeah.
Speaking of thrusters, Callie, there was the
Uh,
next thing was all about thrusters, and we've lost thruster ratings. How will we know how awesome the ships are?
I'm going to guess field experience.
Now, the thruster ratings were relatively meaningless as it
Well,
was.
that's
And
true.
the
Right.
whole idea was supposed to be that you would get some idea if you went from a 2 to a 3 that this would be a better thruster.
More
But
powerful
then
thruster.
there's the complication that you say, oh, I went from a 2 to a 3 and the ship weighs 3 times as much,
Hmm.
or I went from a 3 to two twos and the ships weigh almost exactly the same. Well, what's the actual thrust output of something in engine? And they didn't have an answer.
You're
And
right.
they didn't want to have an answer at that point.
And
And
even if they did have an answer, trying to as a consumer in the
yeah,
2947 year, trying to figure out what these agility numbers could possibly mean is fairly difficult, which is why they changed it to the sort of numbers that say, okay, it turns 15 degrees per second or 20 degrees per
yeah.
second, because
Um,
those are concrete numbers that you can understand.
and there's some learning here as well. To bring up Elite Dangerous very quickly,
Okay.
in game, they don't really tell you anything about the ship. There's basically no knowledge. But when you go to third-party tools, there's two websites that get a lot of attention. One of them is called inara.cz, and the other one is coriolis.ecdb.io. Both of them amazing tools. My hat's off to the developers. Thing is, Inara gives proprietary numbers. They say that this has a maneuverability rating of like 150 or something like that. And I think of that sort of like the TR3 rating. It doesn't tell you a whole lot. It just looks like it's a bigger number. Coriolis will tell you the ship has a pitch rate of 15 degrees or 20 degrees or whatever it is when you click on the ship and you go into characteristics. So if you want to go in here, scroll down, and then there's a tab that'll say characteristics off to the right, probably. There you go. Not offense, not defense. Oh, there it was. Second tab, profiles. That's the one. And you can see it right there. You can actually see rotation rates, pitch rates, yaw rates. That information is exactly what you need people to see to actually understand if the ship's any good. Or the build itself is any good in this case. Coriolis is a tool for making your own ship builds. It's very, very good. But when we go back to Star Citizen, this is the information you want.
Mm-hmm.
You specifically want that sort of a rate to be able to understand why that ship, like the Hornet, might be better or worse than a Gladius. They have a lot of material. CIG has a lot of material to work off of to understand how and why people will start crunching numbers. And looking at the thrust ratings versus this, there's a historical precedent for saying we need to make sure that we give exact values even if we end up changing them.
Yeah, and if we look at, let's see, the specifications on the new 325A, you can see, okay, pitch and yaw are actually identical and roll is faster. And then you've got the acceleration, which is also important. And I think that the y-axis acceleration, that's pitch? Or is that normally considered yaw?
Y? Like, we're talking up and down?
Yeah.
That's probably Z.
Up and down is pitch.
Right, but it's got
Left and
x-axis,
right is
y-axis,
yaw.
and z-axis, and the
Yeah.
order.
Oh, Z is your roll.
Right, z is your roll.
Okay.
X and Y on a plane.
X is going to be your yaw. Y
That's
is
what I
gonna be
figured.
your
X would be
pitch.
yaw and Y would be pitch. In that case, these are backwards. Because pitch,
Don't-
yaw, roll, then X, Y, Z.
Don't
Yaw
forget
should be the
there's
first
braking
listed thing.
directions as well.
But what that suggests to me is I'm looking at the 325A, which is basically a fighter, which it has specs that I would expect, which is so the maximum pitch speed.
Whoa. But that's acceleration.
Right, the maximum pitch speed is 75 degrees per second. The time it takes to get to that maximum pitch speed is based on this acceleration number. That's how I'm reading this.
Is that true? I thought that those numbers were the ability to strafe in that direction.
Oh, you think those are strafe numbers?
I think they
You
are.
might
I
be
think
right.
those are strafe numbers.
Yeah,
I would
okay.
bet that saying like your z-axis acceleration when you're talking about strafing, that's a little bit different. But
Okay.
Z might actually just be forward and backward. That could be saying that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and we're looking at this is a 325A.
Mhm.
X-axis acceleration, so that would be 72 meters a second. Z-axis acceleration. I'm not sure if Y-axis acceleration on this is just your forward line acceleration.
It
I
could also
wonder. You think it's the main thrusters?
I think
wondering.
it's main thrust. I think it's the thrust output that you can generate in one direction with no other thrust. So in the case of the y-axis acceleration, that's the main thruster plus any maneuvering thrusters aiming for y-axis going forward. Z-axis is up and down, and then x-axis is left and right.
Yeah, I think that makes the most sense. You're right. I think I misinterpreted that when I was looking at it. So that's what these new numbers represent. And in a sense, you can look at these x-axis, y-axis, z-axis acceleration as the ability of the ship to maneuver with its strafing to be harder to hit. If those numbers are very small, it's not going to be able to do much dodging. If those numbers are bigger, it's probably going to be a much better dogfighter.
Whereas the pitch, yaw, and roll are main thruster is active and fully engaged, and you're using your maneuvering thrusters.
You're using all maneuvering
Push.
thrusters, and you're
Yep.
probably turning, at the optimal
And-
throttle rate.
I'm looking at the constellation right now. X-axis is 19, Z-axis is 23, Y-axis is 34.7.
Wow, that is
So
way
I'm pretty sure
lower.
that Y-axis is going to be your forward,
Yeah.
your forward thrust.
Oh, we figured it out. Good job, everybody. All right. We did all our research right here on the show.
Yeah,
Okay.
You always wanted to see us Google search live on the show. And
Anyway, so that's a new thing, and it looks like the emphasis now is on the number and type of thrusters rather than thruster ratings. So
Yeah.
they do make a big deal of pointing out that if you have many fixed thrusters, you're going to get more responsiveness than if you have a fewer number of gimbaled thrusters, because there's a time lag where the gimbaled thruster actually has to turn to the point where it needs to actually make the thrust. So depending on how well your computer can plan ahead of what your maneuvers are, if you suddenly change direction, your gimbaled thrusters are going to need to spend that quarter to a half a second to turn and then fire.
And Bridger, the example of that goes right back to the 325A.
Yeah.
Do a comparison with the 350R, and you will see the 350R is, in every regard, in every direction, from straight to strafing, the superior ship.
Right, because it's the racer variant.
Yep, it cannot mount the same number of guns, but it sure can turn and strafe a lot better.
They can't mount the same number of guns again? They changed that?
I mean,
No, the R has only had 2 hard points for a long time, I thought.
That was 3. They had a nose.
So looking at weaponry here, the R has 2 Omnisky laser cannons and 2 Spark 1s. The A has a Strife mass driver, 2 Omnisky laser cannons, and 2 Dominator EM2 missile mounts.
That's the base loadout.
Yeah, but so it looks like there are 3 4 weapon mounts on the A and 2 on the R, and the size appears to be bigger on the A at some point.
That would be a spec change if so.
I believe so.
Can you click on them and see actually in there?
Nope, cannot click on it, but I can sure link you a page.
Now, this is interesting because the 325A has gimbal-mounted thrusters, but it has tons of them.
It sure does.
Normally, you expect to see fewer gimbal-mounted thrusters, but this has 12 gimbal-mounted thrusters.
All of them have
all of the 300s.
Yeah, have 12, but the R has 2 main thrusters, 2 fixed mount thrusters that are also main thrusters, and that explains the giant difference in maneuverability.
Right. Okay. Anyway, we need to stop examining the Origin 300 line, which I'm sure we will do when they do the remake.
This shows that they are making ship changes on the fly right now.
Yep.
Because it used to be that the 350R had 3 mounts.
Yeah.
Yep.
And the 2 wing mounts, but
now
therefore I demand my money back. Anyway, so weapon hard points, we see some changes here, and Gray, it seems like you put a note about we're lamenting the fact that we can't purposefully undersize a weapon slot. Who does that?
People who are concerned about power and heat.
Yep. It's more efficient to have under spec weapons that take up a small amount of your overall power, and then you give full engines and shields and whatnot your main amount of power.
It actually is a substantial change from their original design and the design of other games as well, in saying you must mount the maximum sized weapon here. It simplifies the system substantially, but it means that even from a cost perspective, if you're outfitting a new ship, if you see a size 6 gun on there, you have to stick a size 6 gun on there. You can't put something
or a gimbal with a size 5. That is still, just to clarify, that is still the method by which they sort of balance the gimbals. Is if you want to put a gimbal on it, it has to be one
size lower. It's still a size 6 gimbal.
Yeah.
Sure.
It just means 6 to 6. You couldn't have a size 2 gimbal on a size 6 mount.
Right, correct.
Now, to add a hopeful note, it could be that they will add in the universal adapters to take down a weapon from size 3 to 2 or from size 6 to 4 or whatever you're going to do.
But the main thing I think they were trying to solve is you put a size 6 thing inside a size 6 hardpoint, period. But you're right, there might be an adapter that turns a 6 into a 3 That could
Yeah.
certainly be something they explore because that still keeps the consistency there, and that's what I think is very important to make the system feel like it makes sense to new people who are trying to learn it.
Well,
Yes, a size 6 thing goes in
Fair.
a size 6
Yeah.
thing, period.
and
Yep.
there's going to be a question about size 6 thing to size 6 thing. If you're saying, well, we can have a 6 to a 2 or something like that,
Mhm.
maybe they make that per hull.
Yeah.
So you couldn't have a size 1 gimbaled weapon inside of a saber or something
Yeah.
like that. And it might be a choice on their part to say certain ships will let them downsize, certain we won't.
Or on certain mounts, like only the forward fixed ones on your Terrapin can do the downsized weapon, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they decide to play with that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see the need to downsize weapons, honestly. It doesn't make any sense to me because we're playing with the ships in the default loadouts. As soon as we get the opportunity to play with making them more efficient by getting better weapons or putting in like those
Yeah.
mods that they talk about in one of the later things, then that solves a lot of the problem of, oh, I don't want it to consume that much power. Well, you're talking about the baseline model of all of these types of items and weapons. If I remember correctly, Chris said that the base weapons that and guns and things that you're going to get on these ships and the base power plant and all that, it's going to be like a 2 or a 3 out of a possible 10 in terms of quality that you're going to see on the weapons and items.
Yeah.
You're not going to get, like, when your ship is blown up, it's not going to be refitted with the best stuff. It's going to be refitted with the basic stuff, the baseline model. So
Yeah.
that's another thing to consider is
Right.
everything's going to be more efficient when you're actually using it most of the time than the baseline model.
Yeah. And I mean, there's going to be a question about, as time goes on, is there a use case for that? Um,
Hmm.
if you take a look at something like Elite Dangerous, I'm going to keep going back to that because it's the space game that's live,
Mhm.
and anybody who's hating on one title for the other can sit and spin.
Yeah.
If you look at Elite Dangerous and the way that they're handling weapons, you will very rarely see somebody say, well, this huge hard point or this large hard point, I'd really like to downsize that so I can put, this railgun that only fits, or that's only like a size medium maximum. I really need a railgun. That happens. So there's a possibility that we could see a new allowance solely to say that certain weapons could be fit into those spots. But then there's the question of like, does the mount fit with the model? And I think that might be part of the question that they're trying to address is do the small mounts currently fit with the ship models in the larger spaces?
So
We'll find out.
yeah, the next piece here talks about how they've refactored and organized the sort of hardpoint system for fireable ordnance, missiles, rockets, and torpedoes. All dumbfire weapons are now known as rockets. They say that those have a primary mission of being fired at ground-based targets because they don't move fast enough to get out of the way of a slew of rockets, for example. Whereas ships in space, especially fighters, generally going to be able to get out of the way of dumbfire weapons. And missiles are basically your smaller sized ordnance that are more agile, and torpedoes are your larger size ordnance that are less agile but have much larger payloads. That's the standard kind of thing you hear in most space games. It seems like it's fine to me. I like the overall feel of it
Yeah.
Yeah.
and the standardization and things like that.
Bigger guns on bigger ships. Not a huge change. Works
Nope.
pretty well.
And turrets. Here we get to turrets. There are a few things, a few tidbits in this article that we were kind of alluding to before. But the new thing with turrets, Gray, you want to give us a quick rundown on what we've got going on here?
Yeah, they've changed to be turrets fit specifically on turret hardpoints. This is going back to the
And they're
whole
bespoke,
turret
right?
thing.
You're going to get a
They're all
Constellation
bespoke.
turret swapped out for another Constellation turret. You're never going to put an Idris turret on a Constellation or vice versa.
And it also means that you're talking about bespoke flash fire mounts. So if you're trying to put a giant gun on the back of the Hornet instead of a manned turret, they're going to have to specifically allow for that by making that weapon. We already see that in the game. With for example, the Hornet and the Cutlass, they give you the ability to replace the turret mount with this bespoke larger weapon mount. But regardless, they're saying that, yeah, they're all going to be hull locked. They're saying that you can't swap remote turrets specifically for manned turrets. So you're not going to be able to say, well, I only want this remote weapon in that spot. Um, but they've got some interesting things that go into that. They've talked about with the man turrets, they're controlled by a player or an NPC, um, and that they have that tube entrance diameter thing.
Mm-hmm.
And then you can go down into the AI versus NPC or NPC versus point defense. Point defense just being a remote turret that's meant to blow up missiles. And then they talk about how any turret can be controlled by an NPC acting as a player, but that AI or autonomous control is separate and requires a blade. And I think I might have misspoken earlier about this. It's sounding more like with the blades that this is a little bit vague on here. They're saying any turret can be controlled by an NPC acting as a player, but AI or autonomous control is a separate function requiring a blade to be added to your computer item, formerly the avionics module. Um, they're saying that basically remote turrets by default will require someone to sit in a chair.
Just not a chair directly connected to the turret. You're sitting in a chair on the bridge looking at a screen, which is controlling the turret. So you think essentially what we have today where you're watching somebody aim, what was that, Call of Duty 4 that did the thing where people were firing down and they were looking through the green night vision and they were controlling everything remotely on where the rockets were landing and stuff.
And I'm sure there'll be some fancy, like your character zooms in to look at the screen closer or whatever to make it more immersive. But it sounds like that's going to be the case. But if you want it to be AI controlled, you have to put a blade in it. And then the blade, AI not being an NPC, AI
is
being
blade
the ship itself.
a good word for these?
Yeah, it's a server blade. It can.
I know I recognize
straight out
it
of
for.
IT. Yeah.
I know I recognize it immediately from that concept, like a blade. Like in the parlance of server and IT, though, what is a blade in that? What does that actually mean? Is that like a server itself? It's a full computer?
No, it's a card that's shoved into a backboard. It can be a full computer, but it can have a specialty as well. So if you've got a signal processing blade that you have a QSFP28 port on, it will take in a optical network connection, process everything on that network connection, and then feed it back out, while the data from the processing goes into the backplane to another blade. So you could actually chain together your upgrades in that fashion.
All right, Callie's just earned his pay for today. There we go. That's why we bring him on, ladies and gentlemen. So a blade is a bespoke computing processing piece of a computer. It doesn't necessarily have to be a full computer. I get it. Okay, it makes perfect sense. It sounds
like the blades are probably going to be universal and something you can upgrade.
Yes.
So if you want a basic AI module, you'll be able to buy it nearly anywhere. If you want a really good AI module, you'll probably have to spend a lot of money.
Your computer item can only be so large, and a more expensive one probably has more room for more blades, but it's still going to be capped at a maximum size based on your hull. You can't put a large computer in a medium... medium hull, etc. Yeah, probably the larger computer items are going to require more power, more cooling, etc. So that's all going to be part of the balancing aspect. So if you want to put a blade to control your 4 turrets on your ship, then, or 4 blades rather, one to control each turret, and not have to worry about an AI crew or paying them, then you're obviously losing out on a blade that might redistribute your shield power automatically for you, or would maybe make your agility better by improving the processing of your maneuvering thrusters, whatever. There's all kinds of things they could do with that.
And it sounds like PDCs, which are something that they've mentioned in the past, particularly, I think some of the early ones were on the Constellation Phoenix and the 890 Jump.
Yeah.
They are actually going to be turrets that have a blade built in. So if you have a spot that allows for a PDC, it sounds like that's going to be called out, and the PDC will have everything sort of packed into one. So if you have this specialized spot, it sounds like it'll just be this external, like, plop the PDC down on your hull and it does its own thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then the other thing to consider is blades will have the same system for whether or not they are improved versions of something else with the A, B, C, D rating, which will bring us actually, in a nice transition to other ship items.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah. So... Now, it wasn't clear in this article. Do you guys think the new grading system, A for absolute best grade of this generic item, whatever, is that going to apply to weapons in addition? Because they didn't talk about that specifically. This article is on all other items that we haven't talked about. Power plants, cooling, et cetera, computers. I don't know. They've got to have grades, too, on the weapons, right?
if you look down, there's item classifications too.
Yes.
So it's going to be like a military A grade
Yeah.
Yeah.
or a competition D grade if you really want everything to fry.
Who's gonna
Uh,
competition degrade?
I mean,
Somebody
if you
who
think
can't
about
afford, like, this next race is our last chance.
Hey,
The last chance,
somebody-
Herbie. We just have to
Hey.
do it. We'll just use this competition D
I would
grade
imagine
thruster.
if you're just getting into it and you buy yourself a Mustang Gamma as a player in the universe and you're
Mhm.
just getting into it, you really might need a competition D grade thruster
Yeah.
because
Okay.
that's what comes on the Mustang Gamma.
Yep.
Yeah.
Alternatively, if you just got your hull back, but you had no insurance on your weapons or gear, you
Yeah.
may just have the money available to buy D grade stuff.
Sure.
So there's a reason for it where it's just cheap, and if you're going
The
to win
big
by
race is
ramming
around the
other
corner,
guy,
but our ship was blown up. Oh
Yep.
no! I just can't
So-
wait for the first like sports related Star Citizen movie to get made. Right, the underdog
Yeah.
story, like Herbie rides again in space. I want
As
that.
recorded from one of those
well,
Makos, the Mako
Yeah.
news van.
Yes, exactly.
well, plus the tinkering. So maybe you can take that D grade, but it's got a lot of room to put new parts on it, tinker it, make it better. Whereas the A grade is tight and doesn't have any room at all. You modify that, you're going to break it.
Ron
Yeah, I mean
wants
they're
a
talking about
larger-
sub-item slots being more prevalent on the A grade things.
Yeah.
There.
And it says usually A and B have an additional sub-item slot. That suggests that there
Yeah.
are almost always sub-item slots on all grade of items, but that A's and B's might have an extra slot for you. Now, Ron in the chat is saying he wants to see a larger range of grades. Now,
Yeah.
I don't think these grades have anything to, they do not replace the system for tweaking your items that they did sort of outline a long time ago, which was basically if you take an item and you have some certain parts, you could try to tweak it to make it more efficient, more powerful, less cooling required, etc., etc. But every time you try to do that, there's a chance that it fails and goes bad, and that kind of a system. I think they have something like that in Elite, don't they?
They do. It's a little bit different. So Elite actually has basically 4 grades or 5 grades, but 2 of them are weird. So E, yeah, I have to say that way. E, C, and A are exactly what you'd expect. E is the baseline for every ship that comes with. C is a mid-grade that's just better than an E in every way. And A is better than an E or a C in any way.
Mm.
When you're talking about internals, this has nothing to do with weapons. There's a D grade, which is always better than an E, but worse than a C, but lighter than anything else. It's super, super light.
So if you need more hull space, you've got some options.
Well,
cargo
if you
space,
need
cargo
less
space.
weight.
Yeah.
So explorers in particular will put a lot of D graded on there. Some transport ships will put D on there so they have a larger jump range or higher speed. And then B grade in Elite Dangerous is very heavy, like exceptionally heavy, twice the weight of the other modules usually.
Mm.
But it's very, very difficult to break it. It has really high integrity, and it's still better than a C grade. So it's sort of that situation where Elite has crammed everything into 5 grades. What we're talking
but
about
it's so
with components,
unintuitive.
it is
The way that that you just described that it makes except the fact that you explained it to me, I would not have noticed that pattern on my own. I would have just said, "Oh, B is better than a C," right? And just automatically upgraded it when I had some money.
And your ship would have weighed so much that you would never have gotten to the next star system.
Right.
And this is a problem.
Yes.
When you look at what CIG is doing, you're going to be talking about, first and foremost, people will make a decision, do I have my standard civilian model or do I want to do something else? So that's your first layer of choice. Well, okay, I really, really want industrial grade because I'm going to have so much wear and tear on this thing. So start there. And then they have to look at that point, you're talking about grades. Well, D is really terrible. C is standards. You're probably going to start with a C. B is good and A is the best. So I kind of like the way that CIG has chosen to do this, saying first and foremost, let's split this into 5 categories, and those 5 categories should be very well defined. And then just saying everything in there is a direct upgrade. Just go up the scale.
And not only that, certain ships won't fit certain items. Like I'm guessing an Origin 600i will not fit military class items, right? It It says, well, maybe, but it says players will only be able to put an item of that class onto a ship that can utilize it. So maybe that's a bad example. Maybe the Origin could fit civilian or military, but not stealth or industrial or competition. Because this 600i is not a stealthy ship. It's like huge.
Not
Probably not stealthy. So that's a perfect example. Like you're limiting.
If I had to take a wild guess, I would say we're much more likely to see industrial and competition grade things get limited.
Yeah. Industrial is going to be on things like
military.
the Reclaimer and the Orion. And then you're going to see all the racers are going to have competition parts and civilian parts probably.
I think we'll probably see stealth parts available for nearly everything.
You think?
Just because all you're doing is reducing your signature and consumption.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, that's kind of beneficial in pretty much every situation. You don't want to get caught by pirates ever.
Well, it gives you a trade to make. If you're using a civilian grade A-rated power plant in the 600i, you might just be a giant light bulb flying around.
Yeah, but you'll fly very quickly and your shields will be very powerful.
Yeah. Yep. But that's just it. If you go to the stealth, it's very possible that you won't be able to reach the same speeds as quickly. You'll have massive problems getting away comparatively, but they may not find you. Yeah. And that's actually a compelling gameplay choice.
Yes.
And
two different, very different types of gameplay.
Yeah, and again, the tinkering may let you take an A piece, which is heavy and high power, and bring that consumption down, to a stealthier level.
So I definitely like this new system. I'm excited. The sub items are a thing we haven't talked about. This is a very interesting choice. Sub items slot into regular items. So you'd have a power plant with 2 or maybe 3 or whatever sub items that can slot into it. And the sub items improve one of 3 categories: efficiency, protection, or detection. So, efficiency actually improves the performance of the thing. Maybe it produces less heat and produces more power or whatever. Protection increases the durability of the item and reducing the chance that it fails when the ship is struck, et cetera, et cetera. Detection reduces the signature. But these sub items wear out.
What a great chart, by the way.
Oh yeah, the little.
If you take a look at that,
zoom that in. The sub items are consumable, which is an interesting choice. Is this the beginning of like CIG's ultimate pay-to-win money-making scam?
No.
Like you're going to have to pay real money to convert it into space gems that you can use to buy the best consumables that last longer?
I think when you say consumable, it's better to look at it like Diablo 3 or Diablo 2.
Sure.
You're never going to unslot one of these. You either overwrite and destroy it, or you leave it there.
You think so? You don't think it seemed to imply that it would wear out?
Everything will wear out. All the components wear out.
So you're thinking everything has a durability like your armor in World of Warcraft. Except instead of based on when you die and go to a graveyard, it's based on how much you use the item in question.
And they're talking about you'll need to carry spares,
Mm-hmm.
And you need to be able to swap these out over an extended duration trip. That tells me you won't be able to fix them yourself. But it's very possible that once you take it out, if you have a workbench, you could work on it.
And like everything else, you can see these come in all the 4 different grades, and they actually have some manufacturers listed at the top. I believe that's what those are, right? Those look like manufacturers to me, brands.
At the top?
At the top, right? Sakura-san,
Protection.
Oregon, Wilsop, Juno.
Jung. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think those are manufacturers, and then within each of those lines, like so the Sakura-san is like the Toyota, like the high, or maybe like the BMW, like the best parts ever, and Oregon is like the regular, etc. That's the kind of thing that you're looking at there. And then inside that, you can see like under detection, there's a thing that blocks infrared. There's something that blocks the magnetic spectrum. There's something else that blocks like something else. Active scan blocking. Wow. So even though, this thing, this is going to be more stealthy. How is it going to be more stealthy? Are you going to fit all 3 or 4 of the detection blockers onto all of your parts in order to make a truly stealth ship? or are you going to try to put some efficiency things in there too to make your shields a little bit stronger just in case? This does seem like a really cool set of choices to make.
And let's be blunt, they're not going to make it so these things will run out over the course of one fighter trying to get to a fight and run around.
No, I would hope not.
Stuff like the malfunction blocking way down at the bottom.
Yeah.
I would imagine that is going to try to prevent your weapons from getting nuked by Joker weapons.
Yeah, like EMP style things?
Yep.
Yeah.
And a huge portion of fighting against EMP or fighting against the cannons, the sucker punch cannons, will be having malfunction prevention on your components. Otherwise, people will ignore having to kill you with damage and they will shut you down. But having a couple of those that are very well rated will probably mean that they have to actually kill you.
And the other piece of this is, I imagine, in multi-crew type situations, in the larger ships, especially the much larger ships, or maybe like a Constellation, right? So you have it all rated for stealth, and you're like, okay, we're going to try to make this run across dangerous territory with this valuable cargo. But then as soon as we get spotted, they're like calling Jimmy in engineering, and they're like, Jimmy, slot out all the stealth stuff. We need surge protectors, kinetic damage boosts, etc., etc. So Jimmy's running from panel to panel, like pulling out things and shoving things in and just closing doors. And that sounds like a really compelling thing. Like, you need to do that fast. Anyway, yes.
I also wanted to make a note about Ron in the chat. Just noted that Lando did say that they didn't want people to immediately just equip military equipment without checking the others. So there will be downsides to military and some ships that just can't have it.
Right. Specifically, one of the downsides is cost, but then they also mentioned emissions is a bigger thing. Military grade stuff is designed to perform better regardless, because not all military grade stuff is based on stealth. It's based on when you're in combat, you need to depend on this thing. It's going to work better.
Maximum efficacy.
Exactly. So anyway, there's a couple more articles, cargo and standard cargo units. That's pretty interesting. We don't have a lot of time to cover it, so we're going to move on. There's also variants and modules. The basics there is variants have been locked down to mean anything with hull changes specifically. Hard points or physical changes to the hull are considered variants. Modules
350R versus 325.
Exactly. You have different hard points.
The other thing here to cover as well is the upgrade to the Hornet, to the A Hornet instead of the F Hornet. That may very well be one of these hardpoint changes. They've sold you a kit to stick in the hardpoint that knocks out other options for upgrading your Hornet to a different ship pack.
Right. I think that would fall under a module, because they talk about how modules are things that slot, bespoke things that slot into a space on the ship, like the Redeemer, the bomber spots on the Redeemer.
The 600 eyes entire back section. Touring versus exploration. That's the only difference.
So those are different things that you can buy aftermarket to swap those things around, or you can get them coming with a specific thing. And then everything else that's just like a change in the look of a ship that doesn't change the actual effectiveness, or just swapped out pieces like hard point units, like different weapons, but the same underlying hard points. Those are now known as special editions. So variants, modules, and special editions is the new nomenclature around those things. But let's get to Citizencon, because holy crap, it's been an hour and we still haven't talked about it, and it's amazing. So, the Consolidated Outland Pioneer. Holy fuck. They changed the game like 4 times in this thing. And this is the first one. Okay, so the first thing I have to say is when they showed the video and he's talking about colonization, I'm like, huh. But are players going to be able to do that? Or is this going to be like an NPC thing? And then they're like, nope, you can buy it, limited quantities. And I'm like, but then they can they have to be limited, right? There has to be specific spots. Nope. You can choose a spot on the moon and just buy it and send a ship there and build your own base.
Down.
And I'm like,
putting a refuel station on Luna. I'll tell you that right now.
And it's like, wait a minute. So it doesn't matter where you put it, right? No, it matters where you put it, because there's different resources and you have to go and scout and find the places that are most valuable. And I'm like, so they
or your resource is just, it's pretty.
Inside Star Citizen, they now have added a 4X strategy game and a city builder
Yep.
Yep.
And they're not done, because then, like, you can build your own base, but they're going to use this to fill in the worlds, right? So people have to find this stuff in the first place. So that's where your exploration comes from. How are they going to do this? I'm actually concerned, guys.
I'm
What?
with you. I agree.
Feature creep. How are they going to do all this? It sounds like an
But-
enormous task.
No. So when they said game changer, this was the first place my head went. Way back when somebody uttered the word game changer.
Oh, this
And
is
here's
the
why.
one that's been rumored on Reddit for like 4 months, when somebody said, "Oh, it's a game changer."
Lando
You'll
said
see it
game changer.
at
And
Citizencon.
this is why I thought colonization.
Mhm.
Since last year, they've been showing off again and again and again how they've had these little modular structures that could automatically blend into the terrain.
Hmm.
They made a really big deal about the fact that when you plopped a structure down on Yela, all of a sudden it didn't look like it didn't belong.
Hmm.
The dirt came up around the edges of it, and the whole thing ended up looking like it was in the terrain. It wasn't just plopped on top of it or floating. And then they said, yeah, all of our designers, all they have to do if they want to put something down, be that a crashed ship or a modular structure or anything else, they just got to click, and it's there, and it's done. And I thought to myself, so that's a system that a player could click, and it's there, and it's done.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely
All you have
is.
to do is give an appropriate editor tool, and that editor tool is this 3D printing ship.
Yep. So this is crazy. This is absolutely insane. But I think I've been talking for the last, year or two. I think I've mentioned to you guys on the show and off, but that I was concerned about how exploration is going to continue to be interesting without breaking immersion, because there's only so many shipwrecks that you can find before you realize that all 100,000 people that are currently exploring out here are finding these same shipwrecks, and it kind of, it's okay, procedurally generated, but it's the same. You find the same loot, whatever. But now it's like every moon and asteroid and planet in these, few hundred star systems they're planning to build, even if it's just the 50 or the couple of dozen that they want to start with, every single moon, how many just do we have in Sol? There's dozens and dozens and dozens of moons, and just trying to scan a portion of one of these moons that are in Stanton that they've been showing off is incredibly time consuming. So so that's your exploration right there. A huge chunk of it is going to be doing like prospecting on moons for real estate purposes.
It's incredible. It really is incredible. It's going to go back to the idea that it matters that you do short range exploration. People talked a lot about, why would I ever buy a Terrapin when I can have a Carrack?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the answer to your question is that the Carrack is going to fly 17 meters per second in Atmo. And finding what you're looking for may take some time.
It will be a slow process.
Yeah. As opposed to the ability to have smaller exploration ships, like even the 315P.
Yep.
Yeah.
That will be able to very quickly cover a lot of distance and say, hey, look, I found rocks. I like those rocks. Those are full of money.
Yes.
And then you plop down a money printer.
And these lakes are filled with hydrocarbons. Better money.
But my scanners can't find the rare earth metals the Karak will find when it comes flying by, which is why I flagged it for later exploration. And moving
it
on.
won't. Yeah, it might. Yeah, you might be right. There might not be enough space. So we know there's something there in this spot, but we can't tell exactly what it is because we need a bigger ship with more processing power or something. They could make it work like that, or maybe I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, there's an incredible potential from this, and it's everything. It's the end game. It's finally what people were wondering. Like, what am I going to do when I've earned everything? And now we have that answer. Now, if you've ever played Eve or watched anybody play Eve, you know very well that the moment that there are bases, there are people who want to destroy bases for fun.
Yes. That's the sandcastle problem.
Yes.
Anytime anybody's on a beach building a sandcastle, somebody somewhere pokes their head up and goes, there's something for me to destroy nearby, and I just have to find it.
Yeah, and that's what this is going to be. We're going to have huge org conflicts over this solely because someone chose to build.
Did they mention that the bases were destroyable?
They mentioned something about recyclable.
Yeah, the other angle I could see is capturable. Like the base is maybe
Yeah.
quote unquote permanent, and maybe pieces of them could be destroyed. Like doors would be
Wow.
destroyed and sections could be destroyed. Like the interior stops functioning until you repair it. But
I mean,
maybe the
it
bases
might-
itself persists as a wreck, and somebody can come along and claim it and
Yeah.
fix it.
It might be a situation where you might need to take over the base and then hack it once you've taken over everything, and then you can recycle it down for components. So you could remove the base, you could
Yeah.
get rid of it, but it might not be destroying it from orbit. It might be you have to take over, and then you can click the trash can button, and the whole thing crushes itself down over time.
Yeah.
So you're saying we can't nuke it from orbit to be sure.
No,
That's
no, we
correct.
can't. Um,
You
and
can,
this,
however,
they did mention.
nuke the small gray cat sitting next to it.
Oh, fair enough.
So what I really want to see is the scene from Starship Troopers where like you have the base that they're defending with the walls, and like the bugs are coming over, and you're like, oh god, our base is being attacked, and now you've got a whole different, like a co-op defend the base shooter.
and we have seen the first alien life in
We
Engine.
have,
Yeah.
and they
Yeah.
fly,
Crap.
so it doesn't really work with the walls, but. So anyway, this is very interesting. Waiting to
It
see how
is.
it continues.
Very interesting.
And it definitely,
and very expensive.
yeah.
Yes.
Like they
Good
pointed out,
gods.
this is going to be a thing that orgs are going to have to work together to do. It may be very much like Guild Wars 2, like in the expansion when they added the whole like guild hall thing, where you basically needed the work of everybody working together to gather the resources and build the improvements to the guild hall and things like that. That seems to be what these are designed for. That's
but
why
They
they're
also
in limited
substantially
quantities
limited
now,
the
right?
quantity. Yeah.
Well, the quantity of pledge, you can still get them in game at whatever rate they produce them at.
Right.
But yeah, it's that is costly for a non-combat ship. What an org will have to pay is incredible.
Now here's my next level question.
Okay.
Do these outposts that are getting created ever grow, or do they just be static and like destroyable? But do they ever get bigger? Like,
I
does
have two answers.
Go ahead.
One, maybe. If the AI sees an improvement, it may actually do the economy thing. But B, if you land a pioneer next to the existing claim and put another one down, then yes, you've just
You've
grown
got
your
a village.
outpost twofold. Yeah.
I could see them doing something like selecting for each major patch, they select like the top 50 outposts and have their artists go through and like build a village around that outpost. It wouldn't remove any of the existing functionality, right? You'd keep all of like the base's actual like chosen, like the farms and the mining and the science labs, whatever. They might move it around a bit, but you would have like the artists go and build the villages around these things and basically say, hey, some time has passed and these things have prospered and now you control a larger area. It's not just an outpost anymore. It's a little blossoming mining town or what have you. And that gives you a little bit more income. And probably that's the main difference, is it would just generate a little bit more of whatever it generates, be it moisture farming or what have you.
Yeah. And this gives me hope for a Star Wars Galaxy style base building where, you plop down something and people can kind of build around it. And then if they add an AI component to that on top of it, it would really kind of bring home that whole aspect of Star Wars Galaxies that people just love before, the death patch.
Yeah.
Yeah, it definitely has echoes of that kind of play.
Yeah.
It's giving people the ability to finally say, okay, I'm going to make parts of this universe mine, rather than just a hangar that's sort of in a building in the middle of ArcCorp, which, oh my god, we'll get to that.
my final fantasy or daydream or whatever you want to call with all of this.
Okay, Sephiroth, go for it.
So what if in certain situations recycling didn't make economic sense, as it would take more time and effort and money to get a big reclaimer out or whatever you needed to transport all these things back, and the maintenance hadn't been paid, so these things are not worth as much as they would have been because they're rusted or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And so there's certain situations in which it makes more sense to just abandon a base than to recycle it. And now you've got like an abandoned base
Yeah.
that was created by a player, not put there by a mission, not created by a
Yeah.
procedurally generated thing, not even been an artist, but like a player put it there, and the mine ran out of money, and it didn't make sense to
Well,
monetary sense to move it. That's
and
like
keep in
so
mind,
cool.
we're talking about subsumption AI existing.
Hmm.
You could have pirate scouts whose entire job it was to fly around and determine, you know, if they can find something to salvage or if they can find a place to turn into a base. You could very easily say that you have a subsumption AI whose job it is to fly around this planet, this system, scouting for nothing but bases.
Yeah,
And if it finds active bases, it'll try to attack it.
targets.
If it
Yep.
thinks that there's any sort of money involved, or it'll try to call on its buddies to attack it. If it's not active, if you have a base, the power's shut down because people weren't fueling it or anything else, the subsumption AI could be turn this into an NPC base.
Right, and then it
Or
becomes a
a
mission
pirate
location
base.
where, enemies fly out of that and attack players that are moving and NPCs, and then you have to go and find it as a mission, and then when you do find it, you have to drive the pirates away, and maybe even destroy it, set charges to make sure this pirate base is never used by pirates again, or something crazy like that. Man, it's so... There's so many possibilities. I can't even.
Yeah.
I can't even.
You've become a high school girl. I see.
I did it again. So anyway, that brings us back to the beginning of Citizencon, because we jumped ahead kind of a little bit with the Pioneer, but the Intel partnership, which starts out is like a little bit like, okay, hang on now, wait a second, what is this exclusive ship business?
Before we jump further in that, I want to point out, whatever SIG just signed up for reviews extremely well online.
You mean the actual hardware?
The actual hardware that Citizencon was the platform to launch, 92 out of 100 on PC Gamer and CNET and similar sites for an SSD. It's pretty goddamn impressive for something that comes in at a price point you can actually buy.
Yeah, that's
I was going to say, how much
piece
is it
of storage
actually?
hardware.
So
$400 to $600.
Yeah, versus the Optane P4000X, which came in at $1,500 US.
Yep.
Well,
So it's a
I'm looking
huge
at the Optane SSD 900p on Newegg. It's $389. It's $400.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
$400. That's the 280 gig variant, right?
Yeah.
That's the 280 gig variant. You're right. I'm sorry. You were looking at a larger one. 280 is more than enough on your main drive. But anyway.
Yeah. So the point is, Intel's released something that you can actually buy versus the thing they had before, which most of us could not afford except maybe Greg.
Yeah.
So backing up a second for people who haven't watched the 6 hours of Citizencon presentation, and we're going to get to that craziness in a second.
7 hours, 30 minutes.
Citizencon, this little convention just for a single game that hasn't even been out yet, is now the platform to launch a brand new piece of hardware. That is crazy to me.
I would like to note that piece of hardware, I believe the version that plugs into your PCIe, sold out within minutes of the announcement.
God damn it.
And it was announced at Citizencon, and everybody who was watching was like, I'm buying one, because I want that ship.
Newegg
the Raven.
Sold out their pre-orders.
The Saber Raven. Now, so have we seen, I've been looking all over, I can't find a confirmation. Is the Saber Raven a variant that you're going to be able to purchase in-game? It has to be, right?
So
the skin may not be.
The skin probably won't be. But here's the way that they handled that with the Mustang Omega. The Omega actually has an extra intake and an extra power plant, potentially. I forget what the exact details are, compared to the Gamma, the other racer.
And you're talking about the AMD exclusive one.
Those are the AMD exclusives. And at some point it was stated, shortly after the sales started, you will be able to get them in the finished game. But you will not be able to get them with the cool AMD skin.
Okay, so that's probably going to be the case here as well, which is certainly palatable, especially
compared to... And you won't be able
to
do it with the insurance policies or anything else. Right. And it sounds like these are definitely going to be we will not see any ability to use these outside of free flight weeks until the game comes out, unless you buy one of those really cool hard drives.
Okay, so moving on from that, the Saber Raven, it looks really cool. It's got built-in EMPs and stuff.
Yeah.
And certainly the video launching it was awesome. But we got to move on because, oh my God, everything else is crazy too. Animation and graphics. They had a couple of panels showing off how they got the sort of kinetics of like walking up and down slopes with the animations not looking funky and weird. Really well done. And that is kind of fascinating to watch. I really liked watching that.
I enjoyed the previous strut. Thank you very much.
You liked when the characters sunk into the ground?
Oh yeah, it was straight out of the '70s with the goldfish in the heels style.
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh yes.
Goldfish in the heel. Okay. Anyway, so those are two really cool panels. I definitely recommend checking them out. You can find those on the Star Citizen YouTube channel.
I wanted to point out one thing with the graphics. This was really interesting to me. A few years ago, certain things were seen as out-of-engine and pipe dreams, particularly things like reflections or a screen that's displaying a scene from somewhere else at the same time. There was a lot of talk about, well, yeah, we can do that now. That's something that is technically possible. It's in the engine. But we won't, because if you render a full second screen in the middle of an Idris bridge, like a screen showing somebody else's firefight somewhere far away,
or a security camera like down the hall or something like that.
Yeah,
you have your frame rate.
If you will have a frame rate problem.
Yeah,
and we don't want that. So we're going to let you have a full mirror in the bathroom of the freelancer because screw it, there's nothing in the bathroom, so we can render a second view without a problem. We're going to let a security office in the Idris, look outside and look at the various corridors in the Idris with a security camera, but you're not going to have windows.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You get one camera at a time, and that's it.
Yeah. They want you to have nice, expansive views when you are not staring at a monitor, and only the monitor if you are.
Yeah. Right. And it's a technical limitation. It's been there since day one for everything in every engine, so this is not a huge shock.
No, but it's nice to hear that they've gotten over the hump, and it's no longer we can't.
Yeah.
It's that it's a bad idea, so we won't.
Yeah.
Yeah, come back in 4 years when we've got the NVIDIA 2800 or whatever.
Yeah.
2880 Ti. It's got a quantum computer in it. Then panel 3 is Xi'an linguistics, and it's like, holy crap, this is like Tolkien-esque, right?
But did they tell you how to speak it in the original Klingon?
No.
Original? No.
I'm sure if you went to the forums or the Spectrum and you chatted with him about it, he would be happy to translate between Xi'an and Klingon.
They basically have their own Tolkien who's like just has a hobby of putting together a full language from scratch. That's craziness.
Pretty cool.
It is.
Pretty cool.
I'm in love with this, but I have the same complaint I have with people that learn Klingon or learn the elf language from Tolkien. Mandarin is an up-and-coming language you may consider Spanish.
Yes, but then people will understand you. We want
Russian,
a secret language.
I get that. Yeah, Cyrillic. I'm with you. I'm hip. I'm jiggy with it. Still,
no, you're
if you're gonna put this kind of work,
jiggy with it.
I'm making a linguistic reference to a previous generation. I'm saying if you're gonna go through this kind of effort, maybe a language that can advance your career, your life, culture. These are good options. That said, it's really cool.
Okay. So panel 5 is all about the Consolidated Pioneer. We just talked about that. And then panel 6 was the big one, the Chris Roberts keynote. And holy moly.
Yeah.
They built Coruscant. That's the second giant game changer. Is like we knew that
I had a different take. They built Terminus.
Terminus, yes.
Isaac Asimov's Foundation series. They built Terminus.
Because Coruscant is certainly a lot more optimistic about what it looks like. This looks like shitty Coruscant, which you're right. There's like smoke everywhere.
This is industrial sector Coruscant, yeah.
This is where they build the fusion drives.
Oh, there you go.
I mean, they've said
ArcCorp, yeah.
ArcCorp is where you build the fusion drives. Those giant circles you see on the ground that aren't apartment buildings, those are particle accelerators.
That's what the yellow glow is? I was trying to figure that out.
I don't think the yellow glow is that. It's the giant actual circular structures. There's a whole bunch of talk about how
okay, I know
ArcCorp
what
does.
you're talking about now.
Yeah, they do all of these huge particle accelerators and all of these structures that, when viewed from above, there's a reason for them to exist.
Yes.
Um, it's so cool.
It was very cool. Very impressive.
Yeah, and it sort of like was a slow dawning of what they were going to be showing off here, because he didn't make any big fanfare about it. He's just like, okay, here's the new ArcCorp. It's not a skybox like it used to be. We aren't cheating anymore. You can actually fly through it. I'm like, oh, that's cool. So they built like 7 or 10 or 21 blocks of ArcCorp. And now we're going to fly out of it, and it's going to turn into a skybox. And they're like, nope. The entire planet is a city. Yeah. Holy crap.
For reference, those of you listening at home, Bridger's unintentional pun there was in fact unintentional.
What pun?
Oh, exactly.
Okay. Moving on. So I gotta say, what are these glowing yellow rivers of lava? Like, what is going on? Is this
it's
a lava
already been
planet?
Answered.
It has been?
It's been answered. Gray said earlier, they're the particle accelerators.
The yellow thing, no, he said the yellow parts aren't.
Oh, they aren't.
I don't think the yellow parts are particle accelerators. Are we spinning? Are we visible on YouTube right now?
Are we spinning?
I can see us on YouTube.
Okay.
Oh, you can see us? Okay, sorry, my connection must have gone bad.
Well, you should stop buying from Time Warner.
I'm not on Time Warner.
But I need to twist the knife on Time Warner when possible, so...
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah.
Regardless, it's just incredible.
It really is.
I was sitting thinking to myself, I had hoped that they would approach something that was like a big, beautiful cityscape that we would get to at least fly the path like we saw in the Constellation.
Yeah.
Right.
I didn't necessarily expect that they would do this, that they would hit this level of just sheer expansive beauty. I was sitting there just in awe.
It really is crazy.
It was insanely impressive. That's just the long and the short of it. I watched this video. I called my wife into the room and said, honey, this is insane. This is amazing. And there it went. So I mean, I am massively impressed. Although I think the yellow glowy stuff is, looking at it here, probably just a way to abstract out all the levels beneath this. Again, if we're going back to Terminus from the Foundation series, there's all the very poor people living down there with their neon continuously in their faces. So you're getting that kind of filtered up glow from the bottom of the hive world here.
Yep.
Or a 40K reference.
I mean, it looks great, especially when you pull back from space and you see like those yellow things form this crazy like sort of alien-looking crop circle symbol on the ground. It looks super cool, but this is Star Citizen. I want a concrete reason why that is there that makes sense in the context of the world, okay? I demand it of you now. You've done this too much.
It's the overhead lighting. You get down there, no sunlight filters down through that kind of penetration. The overhead lights simulate night and day for the people that don't see a natural light anymore.
Yeah, maybe that's it.
You're welcome.
There you go. It's the yellow sun simulation. Now,
Chris Roberts
with his quote, "I don't think any game has got quite this level of scale."
No, not even close.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Understatement of the year.
Yeah.
Decade.
Now, one thing that is missing from this is like very specific designs. Unique buildings, right? And maybe that makes sense for an industrial center. Like, how many buildings are there that you can recognize in Pittsburgh? I don't know. I've never been to Pittsburgh. Don't want to. But I'm just saying.
Wait. You live
like it looked an like an artificial sky
from Pittsburgh.
No, it's like 4 hours minimum.
Okay. I admit my Californian-ness is going to stick out here a little bit. But since it's like 12 hours from here to San Francisco, I don't really feel 4 hours is a big stretch.
Well, it is. It's actually more than 4. It's actually more than 4 because it's like 4 just to get to Middle New Jersey, And that's
Oh,
if
God,
traffic is
yeah.
on your side. So it's got to be like 5 or 6 minimum. And if you're going through New York, forget about it. Anyway,
no one drives in New York. We've established that. There's too many cars. To quote the great Yogi
so
Bear
do you
there.
think it's the molten metal flowing to the factories?
No,
Rashiu says it's the molten metal, like this is some kind of like Mordor situation. And I don't know. I don't know about that.
Uruk-hai playable race confirmed here, also
Oh,
called
God.
the Vandul.
No, I don't think so. So
I mean,
that
maybe
said-
there's something to do with the particle accelerators. Who knows? But
I
It's
like
not part of the
overhead
circles.
lighting. Overhead lighting being the
well,
reason.
it's underhead lighting because I mean, look at this freaking view.
It's overhead to the poor bastards at the bottom where all the shit goes.
So those are the circles you're talking about, Gray. The large circles that you can only see from space. Those are the
Look to the
particle
left.
accelerator things. I see them.
if you look to the left, they're not lit up.
No, they're just sort of circles in the ground that you can see.
Yeah,
Yeah.
those are what they were talking about, having giant particle accelerators. I'm pretty sure those are them. So that would be a huge industrial stretch over to the left, where
Yeah.
over to the right, it's a lot more of the cities and the suburbs.
Yeah.
See, and I think that the yellow glow is what creates those cities and suburbs look. Though that said, I want to point out that whole flight from surface to the station he's standing on was a seamless transition.
Yes, no loading
There
screens.
was no new loading screen. There was no, apparently, since he was being accused of showing off, there was no guidance system that kept him on path to get out. It was just aim
Point at the dot
for
and
the
go.
aim for the first star on the north and straight on until morning.
So here, a lot of people were probably wondering, why isn't he falling to his death? And to those people, I would say geosynchronous orbit.
Watch The Expanse. You'll see zero G in action through their special effects.
Now, I do have to say, this looks like an awfully low altitude to be in orbit above an atmosphere.
Everything's
So-
downscaled, and there's hand waving about anti-grav and all that already.
Sure.
Although I do want to point out, technically possible.
Yeah.
If you,
No, you might be
yeah.
right. I forgot to look at how far away this was when they started flying up to it. I think Earth's atmosphere is actually about 69,000 kilometers above the Earth. That's where it's gone. That's where you get basically to vacuum. So if this is half scale and this is half the size of Earth, maybe their atmosphere is half as tall. I don't know. Could be.
So you understand, every time you make a statement like that, our resident astrophysicist basically has a blood vessel burst.
Why?
Yep.
Well, because it's wrong, and that's a problem.
And
It can't be that wrong.
To be perfectly
I mean-
clear, it's
I'm basing this on the assumption that Kerbin is just like Earth, but that's correct, right?
100 kilometers for reference.
I'm sorry, 69,000 meters was my original, what I meant to
100
say.
kilometers, the Kármán line, 62 miles above Earth.
Okay, maybe I was thinking of 62. Yeah,
Yeah.
okay. So I got it completely wrong. Good deal. I just say that I did that on purpose to screw with all of the astrophysicists out there. But yeah, anyway.
and this
It's
is close
within
and
reason
dramatic
is
for
the
demo
long and
everything
short of it.
else.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's you're within at least 10 orders of magnitude, so you're okay.
Oh, somebody in the chat, CS Digital Design, said that they moved the station closer than it actually be because they wanted to make it closer and more dramatic for the demonstration. So the
Yes.
station
Maybe they
might
did.
be further out.
I mean, if it's a cargo station and it takes that long to get down to the surface with a load of stuff from your hull C,
Yeah.
I mean, that might be an appropriate amount of time. Let's be blunt. They might want the station to be that low just for the sake of you not having to take half an hour to get down.
Well, okay,
But a lot
so
of that's going to depend on the cruise mode and everything else and how fast you can actually get down with your cargo.
so
Because they did that.
a
go ahead.
geosync orbit is going to be about 36,000 kilometers up.
Yes,
So
geosynchronous orbit
you're-
is much higher than the edge of the
You're
atmosphere.
you're insanely close to the Earth for that particular orbit. But that said, if he's got I don't know, super efficient ion thrusters or some such, you may be able to hand wavium
Yeah.
it away
Yeah,
and say,
just for
you know,
gameplay purposes, they don't want you to spend 8 minutes traveling from the planet to the station because you can't quantum jump out of the atmosphere. So,
But my realism, Bridger.
so that brings us to the 8 minutes of quantum travel that took place a little bit later. Yeah. So, thoughts about this? Is 8 minutes too long to travel across the solar system?
If I'm not on Griffin back, then yes, it's too long.
That's not across the solar system.
Well, it's not. You're right. It's not that far. Well,
Those are two of the planets that are closest to each other.
Oh
okay.
boy. Alpha Centauri is going to be a
Now,
fun moment to travel to in that
keep
case.
in mind what they were talking about too. Chris said that they didn't necessarily want you to be able to fly from one side of the system to the other. They're going to put fuel limits in and force you to go to gas stations in between.
And this immediately bothered me because I'm used to the travel in Eve and Elite, but those have far more star systems than Star Citizen is going to have. So you just have to picture the scale. In Eve Online, it's going to take you hours and hours and hours to cross from one side of the solar system, so one side of the galaxy to the other, but you're going to be crossing a single individual system in like minutes or less. But in Star Citizen, you're going to have fewer total systems, but this time it takes to cross the systems is much longer. So you're going to have, like they mentioned, you're going to, in the actual game, you wouldn't just be traveling for 8 minutes in a straight line with nothing happening. You're going to be interdicted by pirates. You're going to come across somebody who's asking for help, blah, blah, blah. There might be a mission triggered, something like that. So you're usually not going to be going that far away for a mission. When you travel from one of these planets to another, you're traveling to a whole separate mission location, whereas it's the equivalent of traveling from one solar system to another in Elite or EVE Online. That's the way I took away from it.
Yeah.
It's basically back to time wasting, which is kind of an MMO standard. Honestly, I understand I guess the design standpoint of it. You can't instantaneously appear where you want to.
They
At the
want
same
you to
time,
feel scale.
Yeah.
At the same time, if I have to walk away from my computer to grab dinner or what have you and come back to it, or I've got time to do a set in the garage or something like that, it's probably too long.
Well, yeah, but if you did that and then got attacked by pirates, it wouldn't be too good.
Yeah.
But no, I mean,
you.
this
agree.
is perfect because we got, right now, what's huge right now? Euro Truck Simulator is huge right now. And this just one step bigger, and it's all
true.
about the ships. And here's the thing. If I've got to have a Kindle next to me so that while I'm traveling for this 8 minute, I put my feet up and start reading my book, that's another level of immersion that you don't even
Let's talk
know.
about what we're seeing right here on the screen, though.
Yeah.
While they were doing that 8 minutes of travel, they showed us how they basically did the procedural tech and said, we want to have big, tall structures. And they basically are just marking out blocks and saying, this area is going to be the city core, so we need it to be really tall. So they can do bespoke city cores. So you can make an Area 17 or an Area 18.
Right.
In the middle of the other city without a whole lot of work to start. This is their ability to say, okay, we want multiple landing zones. We want, multiple places on each of these planets. We need to be able to do that and set up NPCs there without having to go through the process of manual art creation.
And let me read the copy here. Gray, I'm glad you mentioned bespoke, because if you enjoy bespoke suits, go to propercloth.com/Tales of Citizens to get your bespoke... No, I'm fucking with you. Don't worry about it.
I didn't know we had sponsors.
This show brought to you by...
We didn't tell you because I get the biggest cut, but...
Yes. This show brought to you by Origin.
Yes, and Blue Apron. Because you can't apparently...
No, you can't have a podcast without Blue Apron.
So we're going to have to do it for you.
This show is sponsored by Audible. Go to audible.com/Tales of Citizens. No, podcast.audible.com for your free audiobook
disclaimer,
download.
all the entire stated things are lies.
Get your free copy of The Expanse, which you can then listen to on your new parachute sheets.
No, you can listen to the free copy of Expanse while you're spending 8 minutes traveling to another planet. All right. Anyway.
But back on travel times for just a second. Okay, I have an hour at best a night to play a video game. If I have 2 8-minute segments, I'm a really angry person. Yeah.
Like I said,
just as a heads up from the design standpoint, that's a problem.
It does feel too long.
If you look at something like Elite Dangerous, let's roll back to that real quick.
Okay.
That's a game where one jump to one system, just the time of saying I'm going to point, I'm going to charge, I'm going to load, is a minute.
Yes.
You may very likely need to jump 10 plus times to get somewhere.
Nobody's saying Elite is a good game here, Greg.
I'm aware.
Well, I want to point out, and Greg, you raise an excellent point. At the same time, there's a reason I don't really play Elite Dangerous anymore.
It's true.
Yeah.
But looking at that game and saying, well, it's an 8-minute point,
Yeah.
so to speak, point and shoot. And Chris basically throughout the whole load was saying we're not going to let you go the whole cross system and yada yada
Yeah.
yada. It sounds like what they're going to intend is for you to spend maybe a few minutes going to a station and fueling up and maintaining or something like that.
Yep.
But long haul will mean long haul. If you
Right. I
really
mean,
do
I'm
want to go
okay
across
with
the
this
system,
if so.
you have to set aside that time.
Let's go back to Callie's theoretical, like, I've got 1 hour to play tonight, what am I going to do? You're going to take a mission, you're going to be at a space station or a dock or an asteroid or whatever. You're going to get up, you're going to go, let me see, we got a quest from, this quest giver guy over here. He's got a salvage he wants me to go find. It's on this asteroid. And the asteroid itself, you're not going that far away. You're going to spend maybe a minute traveling to that asteroid. Then you're going to have your little adventure. You're going to try to find the thing, and maybe you get attacked by pirates, whatever. Your friends call you up and say, hey, we're over here. We should do this. Oh, okay. You spend a minute. You go that way. All of the places that you're traveling within your hour are probably going to be close together. You should only spend 8 minutes of travel time if you're planning to go to like a completely different area. But
Yeah.
man, 8 minutes of travel time, that just suggests if your group, like if your friends ever decide to travel to another area, like without you, then the first thing you have to do when you get on is spend 10, 20 minutes going to another star system to get to them.
Maybe hours.
I don't
But
know.
that means scale matters. If you're talking about a
Yeah.
situation where you're trying to organize with people, and people say, well, I want to be hanging around Seoul, and you say, well, I want to be hanging around Terra, well, congratulations. You've just cut each other off by a factor of 2 hours, aside from the smithing into NPCs.
Yeah, and maybe that's the way a lot of people will play with each other in that sense.
Yeah.
But deciding to be organized and deciding to own territory, like with the Pioneer, that's going to be a decision that has gameplay ramifications.
I can get behind that in the sense that when we played, for example, the Guild Wars 2 World versus World thing, one of the problems there was that it only took a few minutes to get from one place to another, and so you could never do like surprise raids to try and take an enemy outpost, because no matter how long it took you to take down the door, the enemy was almost on top of you every time, if not before you could take down the door. And so where your positioning didn't matter that much because time travel was very quick and easy to get around. So positioning can matter.
The original RVR, Dark Age of Camelot, didn't have as much fast travel unless it was on your realm's direct border. So if you have more limited abilities, it's 8 minutes to get out to extreme system edges. But if we're going with the RVR model here, it's 2 minutes to get to one that directly defends the UEE or pirate space or whatever you're going to be. There may be kind of a grading scale there, a sliding scale there, where it's very quick to get to a spot that is easily defensible, but takes a long time to get out to a fringe system.
Yeah, I mean, the other thing to consider is in Elite, from basically anywhere in space that's not too close to a celestial object, you can just start going across interstellar space to another star. And in, for example, in EVE Online and in Star Citizen, you have to go to those jump points or jump gates. And that means that if I want to travel out of Terra to the next system over, I might have to spend 6 minutes getting to that jump point. And then once I get through the jump point on the other side, my actual destination is another 7, 8 minutes away. I have to wait 15 minutes before I can actually get to where I'm trying to go. That feels like a problem because it's like I'm waiting to play the game. But I don't know. We have to see how it really shakes out.
I'm curious to see it. But at the same time, I've always been bothered where games where scale and time didn't matter. This idea of I can just instantly be wherever I want to be, and it doesn't matter that, let's take WoW as an example. The Alliance are attacking Undercity. Okay, cool. I'll be there in 6 minutes. I'll run my whole group up, and that'll be 5 minutes, 30 seconds of it. And the other 30 seconds are me opening up a portal for everyone to jump through.
Yes. Yeah, I agree with you. I think but how do you square that circle
on that distance?
I agree. But is this current scale too much? I agree that there's definitely a point where it gets too little, where it significantly negatively affects things.
But I mean, that's just it. If you're complaining about 15 minutes, like, I hate to say it, but 15 minutes is almost on the range of you can respond too quickly.
Yeah.
Like, if things take a meaningful amount of time to knock down a gate, let's say, which it should. If you're talking about destroying a base, doing it in 3 minutes isn't fun for anybody involved.
No.
Like, if the entire enemy raid or enemy org can show up from 2 systems away in 10 minutes and stop you, I think our distance doesn't mean anything anymore.
Yeah, I mean,
think
from a
your strategy
strategic
is
sense, you're
lost.
absolutely correct. But it's
I
just
don't know.
okay,
I
we
think
got to
from a fun
leave.
perspective,
Who's gonna be
yeah.
who's gonna be the 10 people that we leave to literally defend this hunk of rock that we don't know if anybody's attacking, because
Well, but
we literally
it
can't get
means
back
taking
here
over-
after we finish this mission.
But taking over is meaningful. And
Yeah.
if you're saying
Yeah.
that I control this rock, you're saying you control the rock. You're going to have to hire NPCs. You're going to have to put automated defenses in play. And if you don't do that, you don't actually control that rock. You just have a base there.
Wait, I have it. I can settle this argument. We're going to have to wait and see.
Yes.
And
All
with
right,
that,
but-
I think we're going to wrap up. Any final comments on Citizencon here? We probably got 1,000 more things to say, but we're already 2.5 hours into this. Wow,
Somewhere in there, yeah. We've gone over, but that's just a tradition here at the podcast.
Oh, yes. Especially
Yes,
at this kind of
Tales
thing.
of Citizens is big on our 180 to 360 minute broadcast.
Well, we knew this was going to be a long one.
Those of you who wanted a short, simple commute podcast, have 2.
Yes.
There's a lot more we could talk about on these ones, but go read the articles. Go watch the panels. There's so much information.
Oh my God. It's like we've had nothing and now we've got a flood.
It's an insane amount of and actually Roberts addresses this during his keynote address. It was a long time between 2.63 and when we think we'll get 3.0 out to you, and that's just not acceptable. And he's not wrong.
And that was one final thing that I'll note before we close out, is he did mention that for this specific patch and for the previous patches, they've basically content locked a patch, and they said we're not going to release this big patch until all this stuff is done. But future stuff after 3.0 is out the door, future patches will be date locked. Like they'll release 4 patches a year, and whatever elements are finished will go into that patch, and stuff that isn't
a lot of
finished
it'll just be ships.
Right. It'll be probably ships that are getting put in. It'll be new subsystems that are coming online or being put in their early stages just for testing, new types of weapons and clothing and armor and stuff like that as they become finished. The content is going to be smaller bite-sized pieces that get added. A new space station here, a new asteroid belt there, a new, set of missions on this moon over here that are now procedurally generated based around a new little sub area that you can land in, like a mining area. Yeah. Those will all get added bit by bit all over the place, instead of like, okay, we're going to wait for this next patch until we can finish this entire moon and everything on it. Like that is going to be the old way that they're not doing it.
But hey, with the Delta patcher and everything else, you won't have to download 40 gigabytes for that quarterly patch.
Yay! And with that, I think we'll call it.
Yes, we probably should. But thank you everyone for listening to us prattle on for the last 8 hours.
Absolutely. It's been a long time. I didn't even finish watching all of those. I did not have the time today. I started yesterday and I did not have enough time.
So for reference, they have now released the full 7.5-hour video of the entire Citizencon presentation to watch in its entirety. So get your popcorn, get a drink, get 6, and buckle in, because it's a wild ride.
It is, and I was surprised at how much quality content there was on there, like how much cool stuff. Like even though I wasn't super interested by the linguistic stuff, the history of the Xi'an is really cool, and I want to go back and finish watching that. But all of like it's like all the best parts of the Around the Verses that you may have seen in the past put together. That's great.
So thank you, Intel, for the money it took to make them do it right.
Absolutely, I was gonna say that definitely made a difference. All right, guys, we'll see you next month, final Sunday of every month, the 26th of November, 7 p.m. is when we'll nominally start recording. This is Bridger signing off.
Is that Thanksgiving weekend?
Damn it.
All
right, the 3rd of December.
Okay.
Yep. All right, folks.
That's a good catch, though.
I mean,
definitely gonna be a
I was planning a 10K like 2 days before. I'm like, hold on.
Yeah. All right,
I have got to bail.
No after show
Yeah,
here,
go.
yeah, because it's real late. So thanks
Yep.
for watching, guys. We'll see you in the future.
You will. Despite your best efforts, you'll
Yes.
see me in the future.
I will be.
All